Hello, fellow social work peers. My name is Nicole Gross, and I will get right to it. I identify as a white woman with a mixed heritage of English, Welsh, and overall Mutt, according to Ancestry.com. So I am firmly in the colonial settler camp as far as my race goes. Critical race theory and racial identity development provide an excellent path for folks such as myself who grew up ignorant of how the world works differently for people of color. As an example of my personal history, while I was in kindergarten to the end of high school, I did learn about important historical events, but the residual effects of those events were not discussed. So I didn't know about the importance of race until I began pursuing the subject on my own time, well after college. Racial identity development theory has contextualized the evolution of my own experience with my race. Now I understand how I have evolved from where I was in the contact stage of white racial identity to where I believe myself to be now, which is somewhere between the pseudo independence and immersion/immersion stage, according to Helm's white racial identity model. I don't think of myself as able to reach the autonomy stage just yet, mostly because I have more knowledge and confidence to gain in my understanding of race in America. I wish I could remember a defining moment when I finally understood my racial status in American society. It's kind of like leaving a cult. I had to place bits and pieces of information on a subconscious shelf. When that shelf finally buckled under the weight of all of the knowledge I had gained thus far about racism in America, that's when I finally made the turning point toward immersion. Maybe it could have just been plain old obstinance on my part as well. I was tired of hearing racist remarks from my family members. I have always held the belief that all life is sacred. The cruelty of the people I knew and cared about towards people they didn't even know or had never met appalled me. Honestly, I wasn't too inclined to explore racism in the United States until I moved out of the United States. How the rest of the world perceives America changed my view of America, especially after Donald Trump was elected for the first time. Maybe it was a stark contrast between how former President Barack Obama was treated during his time in office versus how Donald Trump was and is treated. I witnessed a lot of ugly racism from family members against Barack Obama, despite how much his family tried to reflect white American society. The Obamas weren't the mirror, though. They were the looking glass. Donald Trump is the mirror that American society is holding up to itself now. I've never personally experienced institutionalized racism as far as I'm aware. As a cisgender, hetero-presenting, married white woman, American institutions work generally in my favor, so I did not really need to be mindful of whether the institutions were racist towards others. A prime example of institutionalized racism is the TAMP program in the US. While whites and African Americans receive benefits in roughly the same population size, about 35% each, African Americans have to fight twice as hard to keep their benefits. African Americans often undergo more stringent verification processes with higher barriers to access as well. Along with that, the Trump administration is currently using legislation like the SAVE Act to suppress voter registration, which has historically disproportionately harmed people of color. Thus, in answering the question of whether the privilege that I have has kept me safe from institutionalized racism, I would very firmly say yes. In my opinion, when someone experiences institutionalized racism in the early adulthood stage, which is between the ages of 19 and 29, or the intimacy versus isolation stage, it can have an enormous impact on themselves and their relationships with friends, family, co-workers, colleagues, and so on. According to Erickson, we foster deep connections with others in early adulthood. We also expect those we care about to treat us with kindness and respect. A person of color can end up feeling isolated if they are surrounded by white people who profess to be colorblind. White people may not understand that their eagerness to remain ignorant in the face of racism is causing undue stress and harm to a friend or family member who is a person of color. This emotional pain can lead to fear of rejection, feelings of loneliness, and even depression. Having a solid, stable, and loving group of friends or other relationships can lead to confidence, willingness to be vulnerable, and a sense of safety that institutions and organizations cannot provide people of color. According to the article by Kulowski, Weaver, and Constance Huggins titled Critical Race Theory, Opportunities for Applications in Social Work Practice and Policy, there are 5 central tenets of critical race theory, or CRT for short. Racism as ordinary, whiteness as ultimate property, the critique of liberalism, interest convergence, and unique voices of color. As a social worker, I can ensure that the voices of people of color are heard, understood, and respected at every stage of the process, from intake and assessment through treatment to end of service. As a white person, I will work to ensure that interventions are culturally competent by listening to and understanding the perceptions of people of color. Thank you.